Could you imagine a land where empires rose and fell, where poets shaped nations, and kings ruled with both vision and fear? Persia, a civilization older than most countries, a story of glory, conquest, faith, and revolution. From the legendary Cyrus the Great to the rise of dynasties, every stone, every city, every battle tells a secret of a nation that refused to vanish. Today, we take you on a journey through time, through the triumphs, the struggles, and the hidden truths of Iran before Khomeini. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change the way you see history forever. We'll explain everything in this video, step by step. Don't skip it. Don't skip it. There are nations whose stories begin with borders, and then there are nations whose stories begin with civilizations. Iran, once called Persia, belongs to the latter. Before revolutions, before oil politics, before the black and white images of angry crowds in 1979, there was a land where empires rose from desert winds and mountain valleys, where poets shaped identity as much as kings, and where history moved slowly, like the caravans that once crossed the Silk Road. To understand Iran before Khomeini, we must travel backward, beyond the modern headlines, into the deeper currents of Persian history, because the story of Iran did not begin with revolution. It began with empire. More than 2,000 years ago, a ruler named Cyrus the Great stood at the heart of an empire unlike any the world had seen. His Achaemenid Empire stretched from the Mediterranean to Central Asia, linking cultures, languages, and faiths beneath a single imperial vision. Unlike many conquerors of antiquity, Cyrus ruled not only with armies, but with an idea that peoples of different beliefs could live under one empire without losing their identity. In the ancient city of Persepolis, stone staircases carved with diplomats and soldiers from distant lands told the same story. Persia was not merely powerful, it was cosmopolitan. The empire would eventually fall, as all empires do. But the Persian identity, its language, its culture, its memory, refused to disappear. Centuries later, Persia faced another transformation. Armies of Islam swept across the Middle East in the 7th century, ending the ancient Persian imperial era. Yet something remarkable happened in the centuries that followed. Persia did not vanish into the Islamic world. Instead, it reshaped it. Persian scholars, poets, and philosophers filled the courts of the Islamic empires. The Persian language blossomed again in literature and scholarship. Persian culture became a backbone of the broader Islamic civilization. It was a quiet renaissance, not the triumph of swords, but of culture. Then in the early 16th century, a new dynasty rose that would define the identity of Iran for centuries. The Safavid Empire emerged in 1501 under Shah Ismail I, uniting the Iranian plateau under a powerful centralized state. But the Safavids did something even more profound. They declared 12 or Shi'a Islam the official religion of the state. That single decision reshaped the religious and political identity of Iran, distinguishing it from the largely Sunni world around it, and forging a national identity that would endure for centuries. Under Safavid rule, cities like Isfahan flourished. Mosques shimmered with turquoise tiles. Persian art, architecture, and philosophy thrived. For a moment in history, Persia once again stood at the crossroads of the world. But empires fade. By the 18th century, the Safavid state had collapsed, leaving Iran fragmented and vulnerable. Out of that instability rose the Qajar dynasty, ruling from the late 18th century into the early 20th. The Qajar era was not one of golden glory. The Qajar era was not one of golden glory. It was an age of pressure. Two great empires, Russia to the north and Britain to the south, pulled Iran into what historians later called the Great Game. Territory was lost, influence was divided, and foreign advisors began shaping the country's politics. Yet even in weakness, something powerful stirred within Iranian society. Merchants, clerics, intellectuals, and students began asking dangerous questions. Why should a king rule without limits? Why should foreign powers decide the future of Persia? In 1905, those questions exploded into the Persian Constitution Revolution. For the first time in the modern Middle East, citizens forced a monarchy to accept a constitution and parliament. It was a remarkable moment, one that hinted at a different future for Iran. But history is rarely so simple. In 1925, a soldier named Reza Shah Pahlavi seized power and founded the Pahlavi dynasty. Reza Shah was not a philosopher or a poet. He was a modernizer. Railways were built. A national army was strengthened. Schools and universities expanded. Western dress codes appeared in Tehran's streets. His vision was bold, to transform Iran into a strong, modern nation capable of standing alongside Europe. Yet modernization came with a price. Political dissent was suppressed, tribal autonomy crushed. The old balance between religious authority and state power began to shift. Iran was changing rapidly, sometimes painfully. During the Second World War, foreign armies again marched across Iranian soil. Britain and the Soviet Union occupied the country in 1941, forcing Reza Shah to abdicate. His son, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, inherited the throne, and with him began the final chapter of Iran before Khomeini. The young Shah dreamed of turning Iran into a modern superpower of the Middle East. Oil wealth fueled massive development projects, cities expanded, universities flourished, and Tehran began to look like a rising global capital. But beneath the surface, tensions grew. Many Iranians welcomed modernization. Others feared something deeper was being lost. Tradition, faith, identity. The faster Iran changed, the more society fractured between the past and the future. By the 1970s, Iran was a nation moving at breathtaking speed. Skyscrapers rose in Tehran. Oil money poured into development. The monarchy celebrated 2,500 years of Persian Empire, yet the deeper question remained unresolved. What kind of nation should Iran become? A Western-style modern state? A monarchy rooted in ancient Persian glory? Or an Islamic society guided by religious authority? The answer would soon arrive, unexpected, explosive, and irreversible. In 1979, revolution swept through the streets of Tehran. The Shah fled the country, and a cleric who had spent years in exile returned to lead a new Iran. His name was Ruhollah Khomeini. But that revolution, dramatic as it was, did not erase the centuries that came before it, because Iran is not merely the story of a revolution. It is the story of Persia, a civilization that survived conquest, empire, collapse, rebirth, and transformation. A land where the ghosts of Persepolis still whisper through the desert wind, where poets still speak of identity older than kingdoms, and where history, long, complicated, and deeply human, continues to unfold. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to join this space of presence and share your deepest now in the comments below. Long before modern Iran appeared on maps, the land known as Persia stood at the center of one of the most remarkable stories in human history. It was a place of mountains and deserts, caravan routes and ancient cities, a land where different peoples met, traded, and sometimes fought for power. But in the 6th century BCE, something extraordinary happened. From the rugged lands of southwestern Iran rose a leader who would reshape the ancient world. His name was Cyrus the Great. Cyrus did not begin his life as the ruler of a mighty empire. He was born into a small Persian kingdom that existed under the shadow of a far greater power. At that time, the Persian people were subjects of the Median Empire, a kingdom that controlled much of the Iranian plateau. Yet Cyrus possessed an unusual combination of ambition, intelligence, and patience. These qualities would soon change the fate of Persia and much of the known world. Around 550 BCE, Cyrus led a rebellion against the Median ruler. The campaign was swift and decisive. The Median Empire collapsed, and Cyrus inherited its lands. In that moment, Persia transformed from a minor kingdom into the foundation of a vast and growing empire. What followed was not merely a series of conquests, but the birth of a new political vision that would define the Achaemenid Empire. Unlike many conquerors of the ancient world, Cyrus did not rely solely on fear or destruction. He understood that ruling a diverse empire required something more durable than terror. His armies expanded Persian control across Asia Minor, Central Asia, and eventually the great city of Babylon. When Babylon fell in 539 BCE, the event was astonishing, not because of devastation, but because of restraint. Rather than burning the city or enslaving its population, Cyrus allowed the inhabitants to continue their traditions and religious practices. This act of tolerance became one of the defining features of his rule. The famous document known as the Cyrus Cylinder described policies that allowed displaced peoples to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. For many historians, it stands as one of the earliest examples of a ruler recognizing the rights and customs of different cultures within a single empire. Under Cyrus, Persia became something new in world history. Instead of forcing conquered peoples to abandon their identities, the empire allowed them to maintain their languages, religions, and local traditions. Governors known as satraps administered distant provinces, while local elites often remained in positions of authority. This system created stability across territories that stretched thousands of miles. The empire soon reached astonishing proportions, from the shores of the Mediterranean Sea to the valleys of Central Asia, from the mountains of Anatolia to the deserts near the Indus River. Persian power linked vast regions of the ancient world. Roads connected cities that had once been separated by distance and geography. Trade flourished along these routes, bringing merchants, ideas, and cultures together. Yet the greatness of Persia was not only measured by the land it controlled. It was also reflected in the way it organized and governed those lands. Cyrus and his successors developed an administrative system that balanced imperial authority with regional autonomy. Taxes were collected in ways that respected local economies, and infrastructure projects improved communication throughout the empire. After Cyrus's death in 530 BCE, the empire continued to expand under his successors. Among them, one of the most influential was Darius XIII, who transformed the growing Persian state into a highly organized imperial system. Darius strengthened the network of satrapies, standardized currency, and built the Royal Road, a highway stretching more than 2,000 kilometers across the empire. Couriers could carry messages from one end of Persia to another in a matter of days, a remarkable achievement for the ancient world. It was during this period that the Persian capital of Persepolis emerged as one of the most magnificent cities of antiquity. Built on a grand terrace at the foot of rugged mountains, Persepolis served as a ceremonial center of the empire. Delegations from distant lands arrived bearing tribute, textiles from Egypt, precious metals from Anatolia, exotic animals from India. Carved reliefs along the palace staircases depicted these representatives walking peacefully toward the Persian king, symbolizing the unity of many nations under a single imperial authority. The culture of ancient Persia was equally rich and influential. The Persian language evolved alongside administrative traditions that helped manage the vast empire. Zoroastrian religious ideas, emphasizing the eternal struggle between truth and falsehood, shaped ethical thinking within Persian society. While the empire included many religions and traditions, these philosophical ideas contributed to a broader cultural identity that distinguished Persia from neighboring civilizations. Persia's rise also reshaped global politics. The empire became the dominant power of the ancient Near East, interacting with Greek city-states, Egyptian kingdoms, and Central Asian tribes. These interactions sometimes led to cooperation and sometimes to conflict. The famous wars between Persia and the Greek city-states would later become legendary in Western historical narratives, yet they represented only a small chapter in the much broader story of Persian influence. For centuries, the Achaemenid Empire stood as a symbol of political sophistication and cultural diversity. Its rulers governed through diplomacy as much as force, balancing the interests of many peoples across a vast territory. Administrative systems, road networks, and legal traditions created a framework that allowed the empire to function despite its enormous size. The legacy of Cyrus remains central to this identity. Long after his death, he was remembered not only as a conqueror but as a founder. His reputation for justice and wisdom echoed through Persian tradition and beyond. Even the enemies of Persia sometimes acknowledged the extraordinary nature of his rule. Yet, like all empires, the Achaemenid state would eventually face challenges that it could not overcome. Internal rivalries, regional revolts, and the ambitions of new powers gradually weakened its foundations. In the 4th century BCE, a young Macedonian king named Alexander the Great launched a campaign that would bring the great Persian Empire to an end. His army swept through Asia Minor and into the heart of Persia, defeating the last Achaemenid ruler and capturing the imperial capitals. But the fall of the empire did not erase the civilization that Cyrus had built. Persian language, culture, and identity survived the conquest and continued to shape the region for centuries. New dynasties would rise in the centuries that followed, each drawing in different ways from the memory of ancient Persia and the foundations laid by the first great empire of the Iranian world. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to join this space of presence and share your deepest now in the comments below. For centuries, Persia had stood as one of the great civilizations of the ancient world. Its empires had ruled vast territories, its kings had governed diverse peoples, and its culture had shaped the politics of the Near East. Yet history rarely moves in straight lines. In the 7th century, a wave of change began to sweep across the Middle East, carried by armies inspired by a new faith, Islam. This transformation would bring the end of the last great pre-Islamic Persian Empire, the Sasanian Empire, and open a new chapter in the long story of Iran. The Sasanian Empire had ruled Persia for more than 4 centuries. It was a powerful state that rivaled the Byzantine Empire for dominance in the region. Its kings maintained a complex administrative system, a strong military tradition, and a deep connection to the religious philosophy of Zoroastrianism. Persian cities thrived with commerce, art, and scholarship, while royal courts displayed a grandeur that reflected the empire's long heritage. but by the early 7th century, the Sasanian world was under immense strain. Years of exhausting wars with the Byzantines had drained resources and weakened political stability. Internal struggles among noble families and rival claimants to the throne created an atmosphere of uncertainty. At the same moment, a new force was emerging in the Arabian Peninsula, uniting previously divided tribes under the message of Islam. After the death of the Prophet Muhammad, Arab armies moved beyond Arabia with remarkable speed. In a series of battles that changed the course of history, they confronted the armies of both Byzantium and Persia. One of the decisive moments came in 636 CE at the Battle of Al-Qadisiyeh, where the Sasanian forces suffered a devastating defeat. Within a few years, the ancient Persian capital of Ctesiphon fell to the advancing Muslim armies. The collapse of the Sasanian state was dramatic, but the transformation that followed was far more complex than simple conquest. Persia did not disappear under Islamic rule. Instead, Persia's society gradually adapted to the new political and religious realities while preserving much of its cultural identity. In the early decades of Islamic rule, the region became part of the vast empire governed by the Rashidun Caliphate and later the Umayyad Caliphate. Arabic became the language of administration, and Islamic institutions spread across as the lands that had once been ruled by Persian kings. Yet beneath this new political structure, Persian traditions remained deeply rooted. Many Persians gradually converted to Islam, but their interpretation of the faith often reflected older intellectual and cultural traditions. Persian scholars began to play crucial roles in the development of Islamic theology, science, and philosophy. Their influence would soon reshape the intellectual landscape of the Islamic world. The turning point came during the era of the Abbasid Caliphate. When the Abbasids seized power in the 8th century, they moved the center of the Islamic Empire eastward toward regions heavily influenced by Persian culture. The Abbasid capital of Baghdad became one of the greatest intellectual centers of the medieval world, and Persian administrators, scholars, and thinkers played key roles in its development. Persian influence began to appear everywhere within the Abbasid system.
Court ceremonies reflected Persian imperial traditions. Administrative practices were inspired by earlier Persian models of governance.
Even the literature and poetry of the Islamic world absorbed Persian artistic styles and themes. The Persian language itself experienced a remarkable revival. Although Arabic dominated religious scholarship and official administration, a new form of Persian writing began to flourish in literature and poetry. This literary renaissance helped preserve Persian identity within the broader Islamic civilization. One of the most significant figures of this cultural revival was the poet Ferdowsi. In the 10th and early 11th centuries, Ferdowsi composed the epic masterpiece known as the Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings. This monumental work told the legendary history of Persia, from ancient mythological times to the fall of the Sasanian Empire. The Shahnameh was more than poetry. It was a powerful act of cultural preservation. By recounting the heroic stories of Persian kings and warriors, Ferdowsi helped ensure that the memory of pre-Islamic Persia would survive within the Islamic era. Generations of Iranians would grow up reading these stories, seeing themselves as heirs to a civilization far older than the political structures surrounding them. At the same time, Persian thinkers were contributing to the intellectual achievements of the Islamic Golden Age. Scholars such as Avicenna, known in the Islamic Golden Age, known in the Islamic world as Ibn Sina, produced groundbreaking works in philosophy, medicine. His writings influenced both the Islamic world and medieval Europe for centuries. Other scholars explored mathematics, astronomy, and geography, building upon knowledge from Greek, Indian, and earlier Persian traditions. Persian cities became centers of learning where scholars translated ancient texts, debated philosophical questions, and developed new scientific ideas. The spread of Persian culture also extended beyond scholarship. Persian architecture, art, and music flourished under various regional dynasties that ruled different parts of Iran during the medieval period. Although these dynasties often recognized the authority of the Caliph in Baghdad, they maintained strong local identities rooted in Persian tradition. Among these regional powers were the Achaemenid Empire and later the Buyid Dynasty, both of which played crucial roles in promoting Persian language and culture. Their courts became gathering places for poets, philosophers, and artists who celebrated the richness of Persian heritage while embracing the broader Islamic civilization. Persia's transformation during this period demonstrated a remarkable historical pattern. Rather than disappearing after conquest, Persian culture absorbed new influences and reshaped them from within. Islam became deep, intertwined with Persian identity. Yet the memory of ancient Persia continued to influence literature, politics, and social values. Trade routes passing through Iranian lands connected the Middle East with Central Asia, India, and China. Merchants carried goods across deserts and mountains, but they also carried ideas, technologies, and cultural traditions. Persian became an important language of diplomacy and literature across much of Central Asia and beyond. By the medieval era, the influence of Persian civilization extended far beyond the boundaries of modern Iran. Persian poetry was recited in royal courts from Anatolia to India. Persian scholars shaped Islamic philosophy and science. Persian administrative traditions influenced the governance of numerous Muslim states. This blending of Islamic faith and Persian culture created a distinctive civilization that would later shape the identity of Iran for centuries to come. The foundations laid during these centuries of cultural transformation would eventually lead to the emergence of powerful new Iranian dynasties and the formation of a uniquely Persian interpretation of Islam that would define the country's future. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to join this space of presence and share you deepest now in the comments below. In the early 16th century, Persia was a land of both promise and turmoil. After centuries of fragmented rule following the decline of earlier dynasties, the Iranian plateau was divided among rival factions, tribal confederations, and competing warlords. The political landscape was chaotic, and the memory of ancient empires lingered like a shadow over a land yearning for unity. Out of this tumult arose a figure whose vision would reshape Persia forever. His name was Shah Ismail I, and he would become the founder of the Safavid Empire, a dynasty whose influence would define the cultural and religious identity of Iran for centuries. Shah Ismail's rise was dramatic and decisive. Born into the Safavid family, which traced its lineage back to a Sufi religious order, he combined claims of spiritual authority with military skill. By the age of 17, he had begun to consolidate power, rallying followers with a combination of charisma, religious fervor, and strategic insight. Through a series of campaigns, he defeated rival tribal leaders and local rulers, gradually uniting much of the Iranian plateau under a single banner. What made Shah Ismail's rule distinctive was not only his military prowess, but also his revolutionary approach to religion and governance. In 1501, he declared Twelver Shi'a Islam, the official state religion of Persia, a decision that would profoundly shape the nation's identity. At that time, much of the surrounding Islamic world, including the Ottoman Empire, adhered to Sunni traditions. By imposing Shi'a Islam as the foundation of his rule, Shah Ismail created a clear distinction between Persia and its neighbors, forging a new sense of unity among his people. This religious transformation was far more than a matter of faith. It became a tool of statecraft. The adoption of Shi'a Islam helped centralize power by aligning political loyalty with religious adherence. Clerics and scholars became integral to the administration, providing legitimacy to the monarchy while educating and guiding the populace. The Safavid state thus intertwined governance and religion in a way that reinforced both authority and identity. Under Shah Ismail, Persia entered a period of consolidation and expansion. His armies pushed into territories that had been contested by rival dynasties, securing strategic cities and key trade routes. The Safavids established their capital in Tabriz, a city that became both a political center, ritual pathways, messages to gods, we know they exist, and a hub of culture and commerce. Persian merchants, artisans, and scholars found patronage under the new dynasty, while the Safavid court attracted poets, historians, and theologians who celebrated the fusion of Persian tradition with the new Shia order. The religious reforms were accompanied by a deliberate cultural renaissance. Shah Ismail and his successors recognized the power of art, literature, and architecture in reinforcing both faith and state authority. Mosques, madrasas, and palaces were built with intricate tile work, calligraphy, and ornamentation that reflected both spiritual devotion and imperial grandeur. Persian language and literature flourished, with poets drawing inspiration from the fusion of Islamic themes and pre-Islamic Persian heritage. The imposition of Shi'a Islam also created a clear national identity that set Persia apart from its Sunni neighbors, particularly the Ottoman Empire to the west. Conflicts between the Safavids and Ottomans were frequent, with religious differences often intertwined with territorial disputes. These wars, while devastating at times, reinforced the idea of Persia as a distinct and cohesive state, united not only by politics but also by faith. The Safavids' emphasis on religious unity fostered loyalty among subjects and helped stabilize regions that had long been fragmented by tribal and sectarian divisions beyond religion and culture. Shah Ismail's reign brought significant administrative reforms. The Safavid government established a centralized bureaucracy, dividing the empire into provinces overseen by governors who reported directly to the Shah. Taxation systems were standardized and mechanisms were developed to ensure the collection of revenue and the enforcement of law. This structure allowed the Safavid state to maintain control over distant regions, ensuring that local elites and tribal leaders remained subordinate to the central authority while still participating in governance. Education and scholarship also benefited under Safavid patronage. Madrasas flourished, producing theologians, jurists, and philosophers who would shape Persian intellectual life for generations. The combination of religious instruction, literary study, and exposure to philosophy created a class of scholars who were deeply embedded in the cultural and political fabric of the empire. Their work ensured that Persian identity remained vibrant and influential, even as new ideas and external influences entered the region. Trade and commerce expanded under the Safavids as well. Persia's strategic location between east and west made it a vital hub for the movement of goods, ideas, and technology. Silk, spices, carpets, and precious metals flowed along well-established trade routes, bringing wealth and cosmopolitan influence to Safavid cities. Merchants from across the Middle East, Central Asia, and even Europe traveled to Persian markets, exchanging not only goods, but also cultural and intellectual ideas. The Safavid state encouraged this exchange, recognizing its value in bolstering both the economy and the prestige of the empire. One of the defining legacies of Shah Ismail's Safavid Empire was the fusion of religion and national identity. By establishing Shi'a Islam as the state religion, the Safavids created a powerful framework for social cohesion that extended beyond the political realm. Rituals, religious ceremonies, and observances became central to daily life, reinforcing a shared sense of purpose and belonging. The alignment of faith with governance also provided a moral and ethical foundation for the state, which helped legitimize the authority of the Shah and the broader administrative apparatus. The Safavid period was not without challenges. Internal revolts, border conflicts, and occasional tensions between the central authority and provincial leaders tested the resilience of the empire. Yet the Safavids' combination of military strength, administrative innovation, and religious legitimacy allowed them to endure for more than 2 centuries. Their ability to balance central control with local autonomy and to integrate diverse populations into a coherent cultural and religious identity became a model for subsequent Persian states. Persia under Shah Ismail and the Safavids was a civilization in motion. It combined the memory of ancient empires with the transformative influence of religion, creating a unique identity that was distinctly Persian and yet connected to the broader Islamic world. Art, literature, architecture, and scholarship flourished alongside military and political expansion, producing a society that was both dynamic and deeply rooted in tradition. The Safavid emphasis on Shi'a Islam as a central pillar of statehood created a legacy that would endure through centuries of change, shaping the identity of Iran in ways that resonated long after the empire itself had faded. The consolidation of Persian territory, the unification of religious practice, and the flowering of culture under the Safavids marked a turning point in Iranian history. It was a period in which Persia reclaimed a sense of its own destiny, affirming its distinctiveness while engaging with the wider world. The political and religious decisions made by Shah Ismail reverberated through generations, influencing not only the governance of Iran, but also its spiritual, cultural, and social fabric. In the centuries that followed, the Safavid legacy would provide a foundation for both continuity and transformation. Persian rulers who came after Shah Ismail drew upon the structures he established, the religious identity he enforced, and the cultural vitality he encouraged. His reign demonstrated that the fate of Persia was not determined solely by armies or conquest, but by the ability of a leader to combine vision, faith, and governance into a coherent and lasting system. The Safavid era stands as a testament to the power of leadership and the resilience of culture. By linking political authority with religious identity, Shah Ismail and his successors created a model of statehood that would endure in the Persian imagination, shaping notions of governance, faith, and belonging for centuries to come. It was in this fusion of military skill, spiritual authority, cultural patronage, and administrative organization that Persia found a renewed sense of itself, a unity that had been absent in the chaotic decades before the rise of the Safavids. By the 18th century, Persia had endured centuries of dynastic change, foreign invasions, and internal unrest. The collapse of the Safavid Empire in the early 1700s left the country fragmented and vulnerable. Competing factions struggled for control of different regions, while tribal leaders and local warlords asserted their independence. In this turbulent environment, the Qajar dynasty emerged, attempting to consolidate power and restore a sense of central authority across the Iranian plateau. Their rule, lasting from the late 18th century into the early 20th, would shape modern Persia in profound ways, even as it faced unprecedented pressures from external powers. The Qajars inherited a state that was politically fragile and economically weak. They faced the monumental task of maintaining authority over a nation divided by geography, tradition, and centuries of local autonomy. Tribal loyalties remained strong, and many regions resisted central control. The Qajar rulers relied heavily on a combination of patronage, military strength, and negotiation with local elites to maintain in their rule. While they succeeded in creating a semblance of unity, their authority was often precarious, dependent on alliances, and the ability to navigate internal rivalries. At the same time, Persia faced growing pressure from foreign powers. Russia to the north and Britain to the south had long been interested in Iran's strategic position, resources, and trade routes. Both empires sought to expand their influence, often at the expense of Persian sovereignty. In a series of treaties and confrontations, Persia lost control of key territories, including regions in the Caucasus and along the Caspian and Persian Gulf coasts. These losses not only weakened the Qajar state, but also contributed to a growing sense of national humiliation, which would later fuel reformist movements. Economic pressures compounded the challenges of foreign interference. Persia's traditional economy, based on agriculture, crafts, and regional trade, struggled to compete with the expanding influence of European commercial networks. The export of Persian carpets, textiles, and other goods brought some wealth, but it was often overshadowed by the terms imposed by foreign powers. Concessions granted to British and Russian companies for trade, oil exploration, and infrastructure development sparked resentment among local populations, who felt that their country's resources were being exploited by outsiders. Amid these pressures, a new class of intellectuals, merchants, and clerics began to question the status quo. They observed the failures of both internal governance and foreign policy and began advocating for reform. These individuals were inspired by ideas circulating from Europe as well as by Persian traditions of justice, governance, and civic responsibility. They argued that Persia needed a constitution, legal reforms, and mechanisms to limit the arbitrary power of the monarchy in order to protect the interests of its people. These ideas eventually coalesced into the Persian Constitutional Revolution, a movement that unfolded between 1905 and 1911. The revolution was fueled by widespread dissatisfaction with the Qajar monarchy, the encroachment of foreign powers, and economic grievances among merchants, farmers, and urban populations. Clerics played a crucial role, providing moral and religious justification for constitutional limits on royal authority, while merchants and intellectuals pushed for legal and administrative reforms that would modernize the state. The revolutionaries faced enormous challenges. The Qajar rulers, particularly Mohammad Ali Shah, resisted reform and attempted to suppress constitutional efforts with military force. The struggle for a representative parliament, or majlis, involved not only political negotiation but also street protests, popular uprisings, and armed confrontations. Despite the obstacles, the movement achieved remarkable success, resulting in the establishment of Persia's first constitution in 1906 and the formation of the Majlis as a legislative body. The Persian constitutional revolution was revolutionary, not only because of its immediate achievements, but also because of its broader implications. It introduced the idea that sovereignty could be shared, that the authority of the monarchy was not absolute, and that citizens could participate in shaping the laws of their country. It also demonstrated the potential for a diverse coalition, clerics, merchants, intellectuals, and ordinary citizens, to unite behind a shared vision for the future of Persia. At the same time, the revolution revealed the limits of reform in the face of entrenched power and foreign interference. Russia and Britain, wary of a strong, independent, and constitutional Persia, intervened politically and militarily, influencing the outcome of key decisions and often undermining the authority of the Majlis. Internal divisions among reformers further complicated the effort to implement lasting changes. Despite these setbacks, the Constitutional Revolution left an enduring legacy, establishing the framework for political modernization and inspiring subsequent generations to continue the struggle for national sovereignty and social reform. The Qajar period was also marked by a gradual transformation of Persian society. Urbanization, the growth of trade networks, and exposure to European ideas created new social dynamics. Education expanded beyond traditional religious schools, with secular subjects introduced in some institutions. Newspapers and periodicals began to circulate, disseminating political ideas and fostering public debate. This expanding public sphere allowed citizens to engage with questions of governance, law, and national identity in ways that had been limited under earlier dynasties. Cultural life under the Khomeini under the Qajars reflected a combination of continuity and change. Persian art, literature, and architecture retained the influence of Safavid traditions while also adapting to new tastes and technologies. Photography and print culture introduced modern forms of visual representation, bringing the realities of politics, society, and foreign influence into the public imagination. Intellectuals and poets engaged with contemporary social issues, exploring themes of justice, reform, and national pride. The interaction with foreign powers during the Qajar era left a particularly deep imprint on Persian political consciousness. Repeated interventions by Britain and Russia, including the imposition of economic concessions and military occupation, underscored the vulnerabilities of a state struggling to modernize under internal and external pressures. These experiences shaped a growing discourse on sovereignty, national unity, and the need for a capable, accountable government. Many of the ideas and grievances that emerged during this period would later inform the political movements of the 20th century. Religious institutions continued to play a central role in Persian society during the Qajar period. Clerics acted as moral authorities, mediators in local disputes, and voices of political legitimacy. Their engagement in the Constitutional Revolution demonstrated the potential for religious authority to align with reformist agendas, balancing traditional influence with the emerging demands for modern governance. The collaboration between religious leaders and secular reformers reflected the complex interplay of faith, politics, and social change in Persia. Throughout this period, Persia faced the challenge of modernization in a world dominated by industrialized European powers. Attempts at reform, whether in education, military organization, or infrastructure, were often limited by economic constraints, political resistance, and the pervasive influence of foreign powers. Nevertheless, these efforts laid important groundwork for the gradual transformation of Persian society, providing models for governance, legal reform, and civic participation that would continue to shape the nation in the decades ahead. By the early 20th century, the Qajar state had become both a symbol of Persian continuity and a reminder of the need for reform. Its successes in maintaining a degree of central authority and cultural cohesion were tempered by vulnerabilities to internal division and foreign intervention. These contradictions created a fertile environment for revolutionary ideas and set the stage for the emergence of a new political consciousness, one that would demand constitutional governance, national sovereignty, and a redefinition of the relationship between ruler and citizen. The period of Qajar rule and the Persian Constitutional Revolution represent a critical chapter in the story of Iran. They illustrate the struggles of a society attempting to navigate the pressures of modernity, the ambitions of foreign empires, and the weight of historical legacy. The era demonstrates how the interplay of politics, culture, and social change can generate both opportunity and conflict, laying the foundations for the transformations that would follow in the 20th century. It was during this era that Persian society began to develop the tools, ideas, and institutions necessary to engage with the challenges of the modern world. The creation of the Majlis, the articulation of constitutional principles, the engagement of clerics and intellectuals in political discourse, and the gradual expansion of public life all reflected a society in transition. These developments would have profound implications for the future, influencing the trajectory of governance, social reform, and national identity in the decades leading up to the Pahlavi era and beyond. By the early 20th century, Persia had endured centuries of dynastic upheaval, foreign interference, and internal struggle. The Qajar dynasty, which had attempted to maintain central authority over a fragmented and vulnerable state, faced growing pressure from both internal reformers and powerful foreign empires. Into this environment stepped a figure whose vision for Persia would transform the country in profound and sometimes controversial ways. His name was Reza Shah Pahlavi, a soldier and reformer who would seize power in 1925 and lay the foundations of the Pahlavi dynasty. Reza Shah's era marked a decisive turning point in Iranian history. a period of rapid modernization, state consolidation, and social transformation that would reverberate for decades. Reza Shah came from humble or Igins, born into a family of modest means in the northern regions of Persia. His early life was shaped by the realities of a country struggling with tribal divisions, economic hardship, and weak central authority. He joined the military as a young man, recognizing it as a path to influence and social mobility. Within the army, Reza Shah distinguished himself through discipline, intelligence, and strategic acumen, rising steadily through the ranks. By the early 1920s, he had become a key figure in the Persian Cossack Brigade, an elite military unit that played a decisive role in maintaining order and projecting state authority. The political climate of Persia at this time was volatile. The Qajar monarchy was widely viewed as ineffective and corrupt, unable to resist foreign pressure or implement meaningful reforms. Britain and Russia maintained significant influence over Persian affairs, and the country faced both economic stagnation and social unrest. Against this backdrop, Reza Shah orchestrated a coup in 1921, leveraging his military support to assert control over the government. Though initially acting as prime minister under the Qajar monarchy, he consolidated power over the next several years, ultimately forcing the abdication of Ahmad Shah Qajar in 1925 and establishing himself as the monarch of a new era. Reza Shah's vision for Iran was clear: to create a strong, modern, centralized state capable of standing alongside European powers. His approach combined authoritarian control with ambitious programs of modernization. One of his earliest initiatives was to strengthen the military, creating a professional army capable of enforcing the authority of the state across the diverse and often unruly regions of the country. By reducing the influence of tribal militias and local warlords, Reza Shah sought to ensure that loyalty to the central government replaced the radical allegiances that had fragmented Persia for centuries. Infrastructure development became a hallmark of Reza Shah's reign. Roads, railways, and bridges were constructed to link distant cities and provinces, facilitating trade, communication, and military mobilization. The Trans-Iranian Railway, completed in the late 1930s, symbolized both technological achievement and national unity, connecting the Caspian Sea in the north to the Persian Gulf in the south. Urban centers such as Tehran expanded rapidly, with new public buildings, schools, and hospitals reflecting a deliberate effort to project the image of a modern nation. Education and secularization were central to Reza Shah's reform agenda. Traditional religious schools were supplemented by modern institutions that taught science, engineering, medicine, and law. Curriculum reforms emphasized literacy, technical knowledge, and civic responsibility, with the goal of cultivating a skilled and loyal citizenry capable of supporting a modern state. Women's education was gradually introduced, challenging long-standing social norms and signaling a broader attempt to reshape Iranian society along secular and national lines. Economic modernization accompanied these social and infrastructural reforms. Reza Shah promoted industrialization, establishing factories, modernizing agriculture, and encouraging domestic production of goods previously imported from Europe. State control over key sectors allowed for investment in national projects, while the encouragement of entrepreneurship sought to create a growing urban middle class capable of supporting modernization and participating in a more diversified economy. These initiatives aimed to reduce reliance on foreign powers, strengthen national independence, and increase the economic capacity of the state. Despite these achievements, Reza Shah's rule was characterized by: we know they exist. Why authoritarianism and centralization of power? Political dissent was often suppressed, with opposition figures imprisoned, exiled, or silenced. Tribal autonomy was curtailed, and traditional social structures were frequently challenged in the pursuit of modernization of prison. While these measures were intended to consolidate the state and promote national unity, they also generated resentment and resistance among those who felt marginalized or alienated by the pace and scope of change. The Pahlavi dynasty under Reza Shah also undertook significant efforts to cultivate a sense of national identity rooted in the long history of Persia. The government emphasized pre-Islamic heritage, celebrating ancient sites such as Persepolis and promoting the Persian language and cultural traditions as symbols of continuity and pride. Ceremonies, monuments, and public education highlighted Iran's historical achievements, creating a narrative of progress that linked the modern state to its imperial past. At the same time, Reza Shah sought to reduce the influence of foreign powers in Iranian affairs. While his predecessors had often ceded control to Britain or Russia through concessions, the Pahlavi state attempted to assert sovereignty in economic and political matters. nationalization of key sectors, the renegotiation of trade agreements, and diplomatic efforts aimed at reducing dependency reflected a broader strategy to strengthen Iran's autonomy on the global stage. The period also witnessed profound social transformation. Urbanization accelerated as people moved to cities seeking opportunities in education, commerce, and industry. Traditional clothing and customs were challenged by Western-style reforms, including dress codes and public conduct regulations, which were introduced to align Iranian society with Reza Shah's vision of modernity. These changes, while promoting uniformity and modernization, also provoked tensions with conservative and religious segments of the population, setting the stage for future cultural and political conflicts. Infrastructure, education, and economic reform were complemented by an emphasis on public health and civic services. Hospitals, sanitation systems, and public works projects reflected a growing role of the state in everyday life, demonstrating the tangible benefits of modernization while also reinforcing central authority. The state's ability to deliver services and enforce law and order became a key aspect of its legitimacy, linking the monarchy's authority to practical improvements in the lives of citizens. Reza Shah's modernization efforts also extended to the legal and administrative systems. The government introduced reforms designed to standardize laws, streamline bureaucratic processes, and reduce corruption. Legal codes were revised to align with secular principles, while provincial administrations were reorganized to strengthen the authority of the central government. These measures reinforced the state's capacity to govern effectively across a diverse and geographically challenging country. By the late 1930s, Iran had undergone transformations that were unprecedented in its history. Cities had grown, infrastructure had improved, education had expanded, and the economy had diversified. The Pahlavi state projected strength, unity, and a vision of modernity that set it apart from the fragmented and externally influenced Persian past. Reza Shah's rule reflected both the possibilities and challenges of modernization, the ability to reshape society, consolidate power, and foster national pride alongside the risks of authoritarianism, social tension, and resistance from entrenched interests. The Pahlavi period under Reza Shah thus represented a decisive moment in Iran's journey toward modern statehood. It demonstrated the capacity of a determined leader to transform institutions, infrastructure, and social norms while also highlighting the complex interplay of authority, tradition, and reform. The reforms he initiated would leave a lasting imprint on Iranian society, shaping the political, cultural, and economic trajectory of the nation in the decades leading up to the revolutionary changes of the mid-20th century. Reza Shah's modernization agenda, combining centralized governance, economic development, cultural revival, and social reform, fundamentally altered the relationship between the state and its citizens. The Pahlavi dynasty created a framework for a modern nation-state capable of engaging with the international system, while also confronting the challenges posed by a diverse population, deeply rooted traditions, and the lingering influence of foreign powers. It was under Reza Shah and later his son, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, that Iran would experience the tension between rapid modernization and traditional structures, a tension that ultimately contributed to the political and social upheavals that defined the mid to late 20th century. The Pahlavi period illustrates how the pursuit of modernity, when combined with authoritarian centralization, can generate both remarkable progress and profound societal challenges, shaping the path of a nation for generations. If you found stillness in these words, subscribe to Join This S. Pace of presence and share you deepest now in the comments below. Subcrips, thanks for watching this video, and don't forget to like and watch. Forget to like and